Welcome to Chris Henry Sports and Chris Henry's Myth Busting series. We've already covered numbers 1 and 2 and actually 3, sighting, where you need to be looking at the moment you strike the ball. Some top players look at the cue ball, some other players who are top players look at the object ball. You have to find the right way for you by doing some specific tests. We've covered the grip, where to grip, how to grip, what tension of grip, etc. We've also covered the bridge, the shape of the bridge, the form, and also the distance of the bridge from the cue ball. Because like I said in the last video, the distance between the front of the grip and the V of the bridge makes a very big difference in terms of how you cue and deliver the cue towards the cue ball. Now what we're going to talk to you about is striking, more about striking the cue ball. Now, people get very busy thinking that they have to cue perfectly straight to be a good snooker player. But that actually isn't the case. You know, some top players, I've worked with many top professional players, including, for example, Stephen Hendry, and he was a player that cued from left to right. But the important point of this is not how you cue, it's where you strike the cue ball. So striking the cue ball where intended is absolutely key, and that is possible with a technique that isn't straight. Look at Judd Trump. He cues from here, right, and cues to the left, but he manages to strike the cue ball exactly where intended, and that is the key there. So top professionals don't always cue straight, but they play at a very high level. Now, this is the important bit right here, because this is also relating now to the follow-through part of the shot, because a lot of people think that they have to come through and hit the ball in the right position and cue straight and continue to cue straight right through towards their chest. Some players even have the notion that they need to drop their elbow and go under their chest to keep the cue traveling straight. But let me give you a very important fact. At the moment, this cue, it doesn't matter how fast it's traveling, high speed, the higher the speed, the heavier this ball becomes. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. At the moment this tip strikes this cue ball, after around 3 or 4 millimeters, the ball leaves the tip. Let me say that again. After around 3 or 4 millimeters, the ball leaves the tip of the cue. So now it doesn't really matter what happens after that happens now with the cue ball, because the ball increases speed very quickly, the cue slows speed on impact, and that's why this ball leaves the cue very quickly. It doesn't appear to be that way at normal speeds, but if you use a 12,000 frame per second camera, you can very clearly see this happening. So you don't need to get too busy with this perfectly straight backswing, perfectly straight follow through, striking the cue ball and continuing to cue straight after that impact. It's a bit like golf. A golf player comes back up here, and as he delivers that club head towards the ball, on impact, the ball leaves that club head after only a very small distance. But of course, the player with natural momentum is going to follow through and finish their follow through because it's momentum. But it doesn't affect the shot because the ball leaves very quickly. So these are the kinds of things that if you get too busy with them and you're trying to develop your technique to be able to be perfect, it can be really frustrating. So what I would say is the first point for you to be able to do is strike the cue ball where intended. And one way to do that is strike in the middle, for example. Can you strike the middle of the cue ball when you want to? A lot of players can't strike the middle when they want to. And that is important, in my opinion, for straight shots. On a straight shot, it's much more consistent if you can strike the middle of the cue ball and aim that object ball where you're intending. And it doesn't really matter then on which kind of cloth you're playing, you're going to get the same result, compared to some players that play with side spin on a straight shot, where they're now actually aiming to miss, And the conditions that you're playing on now make a difference because of what we call cue ball deflection off the line of aim compared to the side spin that you've applied. So can you strike in the middle where you need when you actually want to? That's very important. Once you can do that, that means you are then a balanced snooker player. You know where the middle is, so now you also know where a little bit of left is, and you also know where a little bit of right is. And when you want to play the angle shots with touches of side spin, or intentional shots with side spin for position, you know how to do that. So let me just recap there then. You don't have to cue straight. If you do cue straight, wonderful. But you don't have to be able to play this game at a very high level. Okay, as you can see on this video here, we've got a piece of chalk there where the tip's on line with the chalk, and I'm going to show you in slow motion as I strike that I'm virtually stopping on impact when I'm striking the cue ball, just to show you that it's not necessary to have a long follow through to get the kind of reaction on the cue ball that you need. And this is just a demonstration to show you that the ball does leave the tip really quickly. Just after 3, maybe 4 millimeters, the wire is gone, and all the required spin that's needed for the shot is there. Of course, in a normal shot, when you're playing a normal shot with your technique, you're going to naturally follow through longer than I just did there because of the natural momentum. But it's just a little bit of evidence that, you know, the ball does leave the tip very quickly, and it's not necessary to have a perfectly straight follow through right through to your chest, because that part of the swing does not affect the shot.